Welcome to Thrive, the podcast. In this episode of Thrive, I'm speaking with Ella Mesma, a dancer and founder and director of the Ella Mesma Company, a dance and circus theatre company that tours internationally. We talk about her journey to becoming, from starting out on the trajectory of politics. She began to listen to her deeper intuition against the advice and opinions of those around her. Yet she also had to face into her own beliefs about herself deep inside and how this colored her initial years during her career change. This is the journey we all face, which is often reflected to us by the people and circumstances around us when we want to bring our dreams to life. It is always our inside blueprint that lays the foundation for whether we bring those dreams fully to life or not. May this episode ignite your inner knowing and courage to follow your dreams. So Ella, welcome to Thrive, the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
I'm delighted to have you here with me to discuss the creation of your dance and circus theatre company. I know there was a time in your life that maybe you didn't quite see this unfolding for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It still amazes me now. Like, wow. Days wake up with joy and just, I made this. I made this up and it's real.
Yeah. Oh, such joy. I really feel the joy and the playfulness in that. So before you founded your company, what was life like for you?
Sure. So I was a dancer. I went into dance. I studied politics and sociology. Yeah, as you do. But always, I wanted to go for dance, and that it was sort of something, a direction I wasn't following because I was very much conditioned of like, you have to get a proper job and, all of these kinds of stories. And I was really fortunate that I feel like I had some amazing kind of mentors that came to me around that time of finishing university. And I auditioned for a contemporary dance company and got in, and then had various jobs. My background in dance actually began with salsa, and then I went into kind of breaking. So I had this quite an unusual entry point in terms of most contemporary dancers, but I was dancing. But there was a lot of not belonging, particularly because I started so late.
Yeah, I was going to touch on that actually, that you kind of were a rebel, because the perception is that to be a dancer, you have to be young and you have to be in it from when you're young.
Right.
But actually, that's not what happened with you.
No. Yeah.
Tell us about belonging. Yeah.
I was very late. And considering, I look quite young. People are very often surprised at my age. And kind of similarly in terms of my body was very able. So in fact, if we kind of rewind, when I was about 4, I self-taught backflips to me on a sofa in my parents' house. And that was kind of when my mum was like, this child has a lot of energy. I think we need to get her to something so she can learn how to use it and not injure herself. So, it was kind of there. I did gymnastics for maybe until I was about 10 or 11. And then sort of it wasn't cool. I wanted to belong. I wanted to be liked, and no one else was going into like considering secondary school and still doing gymnastics. So I stopped that. And I was very much kind of the group of friends that I was in, we were tomboys and we went into girly stuff, and dance was girly. So there was this sort of actually ignoring the whisper that had always been there of what I really loved. And so then when I finally realized that this was my longing and accepted that this was my longing, there was also that fear of, I'm too late, I can't do this. How am I going to, because I came from a family that were very much about career and academia and like success in that way. It was a huge thing to say, actually, I want to be an artist. Like that was not the done thing. So there was a lot of not belonging that I brought into the space. Yeah, every space actually.
So you, for some time, you spent pushing that down, pushing that down, pushing it
Yeah.
down, and following the conventional path that you believed you needed to follow in order to give yourself, the success or whatever.
Yeah. And again, I'm so grateful for those mentors. I got a job, I think it was in 2005. I got this job working for Birmingham Royal Ballet
Oh,
as but it was sort of like it was connected to a school as a coordinator on an education project. And yeah, I just have to big up Pearl Chesterman. The moment of tears when she went, Ella, you're a dancer. You need to go to dance school. And just, even now I've got tears in my eyes. I'm so grateful to those, those people that, because I didn't have that from my family. So to have those people that were kind of seeing the truth and just reflecting back to me what I needed, what was really true for me was huge. Yeah.
yeah. So I guess that was a moment where you decided, right?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
But it was really hard. It was so hard
Tell
because
us.
of the age and because I also, I had a degree and I had a loan for that degree. So it was like, how the hell am I going to do this? I've got to pay to go to a dance school. I'm an older dancer, so most dance schools they take on a 19-year-old. Not I think I was 25 when I finally entered dance school. So I had to fund my way. And again, I think there was always this kind of intuitive and magical aspect to how I was creating. Because some of if I look back at kind of pay slips and things of that time, I'm like, God, that there was a job I created where I was paid £500 for the weekend, but it got cancelled, but they still paid me £500 for a dance show that I didn't do. All these things that kind of meant that I was able to go to dance school. But it was very hard, and I had to I would always be up at 6 a.m, often working till midnight because I had a Latin dance background. So I would go and teach salsa, teach samba, do a samba show. And I essentially, it was a sort of balancing burnout with not belonging belief, being amongst 19 and 20-year-olds
Mm.
and having all this sort of backstory of what was really going on for me at that time. So yeah, it was a really hard time.
That can be quite exhausting, can't it? It's the fact that we're fighting against an ingrained belief, like you said, like I don't belong. So that chatter, that constant need to try to resolve the pain of that is part of what is so exhausting when you're in it.
Yeah. And that did start to kind of leak out, I would say. Really, I really started to get very dysfunctional in my beliefs from I did and even the way I did it, I did a 1 year kind of program in a conservatoire, but I did it part-time over 2 years because I couldn't afford it yet. And in the second year, people started to notice and be like, Ella, you're not okay. And again, it's to kind of remember that moment of I wasn't well. I was so overtired. Dance is also very much about the emotion, getting the emotions in motion, and the body being relaxed and not in a state of fight or flight. And I was just constantly in that state. So my dancing went downhill. And so I actually, that second year, I went and auditioned at another conservatoire in London. Very grateful that I followed that piece of intuition, even in all this dysfunction. And I was offered a dance job in Turkey. And I basically eventually realized I just need sunshine and a regular income and to not think about this dance training for a while. So I took that job, found out I got into this other conservatoire while I was there. So that was wonderful to be able to go, yeah, I'm going to leave that experience, that dysfunctional experience behind and move on to a new conservatoire. And that was a 1 year program. But from there onwards, I would say actually my that year of training became about trying to prove that I belonged in a place that I didn't feel I belonged. And then that continued on into my dance career, which again was successful, but always had these kinds of shadows, overshadowed by every performance. I would be really upset with myself because I wasn't good enough. Nothing was ever good enough, and it was almost like Eeyore Eeyore living their dream life, but not believing any of it to be true.
Mm. Yeah, that's painful.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was
So
definitely.
So then you were part of a dance company. You had a steady kind of position in a dance company. And even though you had removed yourself from that, from what you'd seen as your dysfunction, it still was playing out for you,
Oh,
even this.
massively. Yeah, and I would say that I never believed that I'd removed myself from the dysfunction. So it was so funny, even like the way I would often, well, the way I got that job, that was a huge job. It was like a 2-year contract. We went around the world. It was like my dream job. Um, Even the way I got that job was sort of affirming my not belonging. So I was told I didn't get it and then called for a meeting. And we left the meeting, and then they called me the next day and said, "You did get it, I'll send you a contract," but never sent me the contract. And so on the first day I was like, do I start or not? And it sort of, it just rippled out from there, of this not belonging. It really affected me in terms of integrating with the rest of the company members, in terms of how I worked with the director, because I always believed they didn't really want me to be there. There was so many aspects of this dysfunction.
Yeah, so you're living through the filter rather than being present in the actual experience. You're filtering it all through this internal reference point and this continual questioning and seeking
Yeah.
of validation. Yeah. What
Mm.
were the other things you noticed about how that manifested and revealed itself to you? Because sometimes we don't see it. We feel it
Mm.
inside, but we're not acknowledging, we're not paying attention. How was
Yeah.
that?
I think one, like, well, maybe two really strong behaviors on a daily was the way we would have rehearsals or warm-ups for performances and so on. It was wonderful. Again, actually, if I look back, it was wonderful, but for me experiencing it, um we had a sort of a group warm up, and then it would be kind of improvisations across the space. And for me, that came, I have to prove that I'm allowed to be in this company every single day. So can you imagine the psychological tension going on if every time you're, and that might be like half an hour of dancing in your own way across the space, which actually now is my favorite thing to do in the world. And I might put a theme like I'm going to dance out this emotion, or and it's just creativity and joy and play. But there it became, I have to prove that I'm good enough all of the time. So that was really exhausting. Then I would say, like, that echoed out into how I interacted with the other company members. So every conversation was like calculated in my head to try and fit in and to try and belong and to try and be liked instead of just being myself. And again, now I really like me. I don't have any issues with like what to say, but back then, it was always like trying to figure out what to say. And then there was one particular company member who just really, I feel like, was an echo. It was literally an echo of that belief. So he didn't believe I should be there, and he wanted me to know every single day. And so that just became a nightmare. It was the worst 2 years, like a dream job, but the worst 2 years
Yeah.
ever, because I was experiencing, you're not welcome here, get out.
Yeah, so he's mirroring to you what you deeply believe, but you didn't have a way of handling it at the time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And so like I laugh, but actually, again, like the amount of times I cried, I can remember being, I think that was in New York, like at the Joyce Theatre, like such a dream come true, and just crying at the end of the performance because I was not happy. It was like, this is not good for my soul. This is not why I became a dancer, to just literally be like living a living nightmare of my belief.
Yeah. When did
Mm.
that begin to change for you?
So I think there was a moment, actually, in midway through that job, there was this beautiful kind of moment of redemption where we had like a, not a sabbatical, there's basically a big pause in the project, and I got the job to do the Olympics opening ceremony, which was wonderful. I was a Dalmatian, and I was around very nourishing people, and that job also was very well paid, and it meant that I could then just go off and be with myself. And I went to Peru, I went to the Machu Picchu, I also went to Brazil and Mexico. I did like a wonderful kind of remembering who I am trip. And there was a moment in when I came back where I actually spoke. I faced my my bullies, and I said no, and that was kind of quite iconic. But I think really it continued to play out until I started really doing the work. So the work for me, in fact, it did kind of begin around then. I became a yoga teacher. I was doing that alongside that company. I was training to be a yoga teacher, and every weekend there would be a sort of theme that for me really now connects into alchemy around ourself and our beliefs and this idea of yoking or union. So that was a huge turning point of starting to go, the answer's actually in me. It's not about these external people. But then in 2015, I really found the kind of alchemical course that changed my life, and started putting these practices into process. At first, I didn't even realize that it was going to have such a wonderful impact on those behaviors and those things that were going on, because I was so in the illusion, so much in the story. I really was, what called me was the using intuition, which I then again have used in my company now. But it started to, it's almost like it changed my cell makeup. I started to love myself and to realize that no one else needed to tell me that I belonged, and that those kinds of people in the world that want to mirror your innermost difficult beliefs are not the ones that I want to spend time with. And I just started to really change and evolve. And yeah, now it's kind of, I think it's coming up to 8 years of being in this work. And yeah, again, like I just wake up on a daily like, wow, what a difference in my being, in how I show up, in how I can actually create ripples in what I'm doing and in the workspaces that I am providing in the world as well.
Yeah, so this really was this foundation that you discovered in the alchemical process has enabled you to begin not one but two very successful dance companies.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to hear about your
Sure.
career.
Sure. So yeah, so again, like it's sort of been this beautiful connection with intuition. And I would say the first big piece I made out of alchemy, after alchemy, shall we call it, before alchemy, after alchemy. The first piece that I made was really a kind of exploring of identity and gender roles and identity. And using intuition, it was like I began to see how I could get out of the way and just listen to my heart, to my soul truth, but also that sort of connected state of being where I would see, like, I saw my logo, I saw like, oh, these are the colors of this show. I had ideas about these are the wonderful team members that I want to work with. And it was sort of like assembling this dream power team, but power team also in terms of like every single piece. So the content, I knew that this piece was in a circle, and that was the setup of how the show works. And we entered the circle and we exited, all these sorts of aspects where I began to listen to my intuition. And then even synchronicities of like the people that I met, like I met someone who then called me in for a meeting and they wanted to program that show at Sadler's Wells, and kind of this just growing of possibility, and yeah, and like kind of connecting dots that might not make sense in a pre-alchemy way, but they felt very much true. And yeah, since then I've made so many wonderful shows. I like the past two that I've made, it's like I'm really now, I don't doubt my intuition, it's just like, this is true, and I will just be able to channel that. And yeah, it's such a joyful way of making, because it's so inspiring to follow my truth instead of trying to prove that I'm okay and I belong.
Gorgeous. So in terms of the shows that you have coming up and where you're off to next and your vision of what you'd love to create, what are you seeing? What are you realizing?
Sure. So yeah, we've just finished. So I have now two companies, Ella Mesma Company and then Maya and Tucson, which is a partnership with another amazing human, and has also been very healing in terms of relating we've been making a show called Okan, which is, Okan is a Yoruban word. I also intuitively found my Yoruban ancestry last year, and that's been a beautiful unfolding. But it means one-hearted. But it can also mean stubborn-hearted, big-hearted, small-hearted, closed-hearted, open-hearted. This wonderful, I think that's, for me, there's something in that in life, like it's everything at the same time. And we've been playing with this idea of salsa and Wing Chun kind of movement, but not that you can go, oh, that's salsa, that's Wing Chun, like it's sort of one flow state, like a kind of martial state of being. And that show has been, it's just been such a delight and joy, again, of those magical synchronicities from the moment of us starting to work together to getting a big commission, to getting Arts Council funding, we've just sort of premiered it in the north of England, and then next year we'll have the big, the real premieres, and then we're looking to tour that further afield as well. So super exciting, and again, just an absolute dream team, and to create something where there's not a limit. I think a lot for me in the past, it was very much like, you can have this, but you can't have this. And like, there was this sort of dysfunction even in the way I was creating. Whereas now everything that we've wished and imagined just is there in the space. It's really amazing. So we've got that show. And then I have another tour. I made a show called The Rainbow Butterfly earlier this year as well, which, like intuitively, I saw this vision. I'm also an aerialist, so my work often involves aerial. And this show, I basically painted, or I commissioned an artist to paint the silks into a huge butterfly, which also doubles up as a kind of a river and a leaf. And it tells this story of this child who would love to be a rainbow butterfly, and they go on this journey of discovery and imagination, which for me is very much what my work is about. But that we have so far, next year we have 7 show dates. And it's just this, I mentioned it before, this kind of, I made this, like this was something that was inside of my imagination, and now it's like a tangible thing. And then to see that going on tour is so wonderful. And then in terms of kind of what next, again, I'm just really excited. I know, like, I have choices, kind of set wishes and dreams of what I would like to create, but I'm also very much about the kind of letting go of exactly how that will unfold, and just being in the magic and following the cues and the clues. And I've got, like, my next hit now is, there's something in London that I know I want to go to this weekend because it feels important. What does that mean? I don't know, but I know that it's true.
You're listening this time.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's so interesting, isn't it? When we learn the value of those whispers that come to us, we begin to say yes to them. Whereas before, we really couldn't even hear them, because the dynamic of our internal belief system was just so strong. It's always like a current pulling us down, upstream when we want to go down, or downstream when we want to go up. It's that contrast and that conflict, the internal conflict. Just to go back to your first show, that's that you mentioned there within your collaboration, that's the one, is that the one that's around the relationships and the modes of relating? Yeah. I want to lean into that a little bit, because this is also so pertinent to my work, and I'd love to hear how you're expressing that through the medium of art and dance.
Amazing. So we started the process with the 4 styles of relating that actually originally come from the book The Celestine Prophecy, or as far as I know, that's kind of where I've traced them back to. And you have codependent, aloof, controlling, and then whole. And we kind of started with that as a concept. And I would say that sort of evolved into, it's very much there still, but the kind of whole, it really evolved into this idea of this Okan state of being. And these drawings they have of how the heart chakra kind of gives out energy. It's like a feet kind of radius. And so we sort of started, and it's so fascinating because I have 20 years background in salsa, but I've not done Wing Chun before. And to realize that there's so much around everything coming from this flow state and this kind of energy and moving from the center. So that's been so wonderful to connect all those dots. And it feels I find this always happens for me. It's like there's a little aspect of kind of like an art therapy for me that happens where, you know, I take a topic that I'm really interested in and I dive in and I understand it more, and it feels like I unlearn more of my past stories. So, you know, as a deep not belonger, like I really struggled to create a relationship, for example, but over the period of this time I've created the most wonderful relationship. And it, even like within the studio, working with my dance partner, my choreographic partner Akim Song, we there's been a real healing of our relationship of masculine and feminine, but also that's rippled out into our personal lives for both of us, which has been super, super cool.
That's so special. It's wonderful. Yeah. And so this, what comes to me now is the transformative power of art and the expression of that. And
Yeah,
you know, it's a healing. It's a type of healing, not just for you as the oh, I don't like the word. It doesn't fit with you, you know, performer. It's not the right word for you at all. But you know, it's also for the audience. It's almost like bring the performer and the audience together in a way that it's a symbiotic
yeah,
experience on both sides, you know.
yeah. And that's definitely how
Yeah,
I like to make. It's like this
yeah.
alchemy, you know, the alchemy of the dance, and that it's about it's essentially kind of the work that we do with alchemy. You know, it's going in and it's looking at the beliefs and it's looking at what we would love, and it's transcending and finding that bridge to how do we be in that state of being and create. And actually, even in that space, we all kind of have you know, our own definitions of like whether it's this person has ADHD or ADD, or, you know, whatever we bring into the studio. But what I found is there's so much permission to be yourself to the full, that the creativity, like it feels like the creative container, it is like that heart space energy, you know, it's just like a big, there's two performers in this show at the moment. We have a vision for next year to make it into a bigger piece with them, with 6 to 8 dancers. But there's something about, I don't think we could have created what we've created were we to be in that kind of identity way of working. It feels like everything that we've set up, from the kind of way we check in, it's quite an alchemical way of checking in the morning, to kind of like the processes around the project and so on. It means that, you know, it's like witnessing alchemy, and it's just so gorgeous to have these four creative beings being themselves to the full in ways that, you know, this again, it makes me emotional. Like I often feel like we've created our own world where we can just be fully ourselves, and then the creative imagination, when you are fully giving yourself permission, you know, it feels otherworldly essentially. And it's so cool because, yeah, we've kind of identified that Okan is a world in itself, and then we're transcending this society and these conditioned truths and beliefs as we make it.
Well, I'm so looking forward to seeing the ripples of where your company takes this in the world, because there's so much room for this in the world, you know, in all aspects. Just see that these principles feeding, I mean, even children in their dance classes and many more, you know, places where this approach of allowing ourselves to be fully who we truly are, rather than conforming and trying to fit in and trying to adapt our nature to hide away, because we, in reality, that's just not how it is. And in reality, you have to this and you have to that, and all the constraints that we've laden ourselves with and laden other people with, and what that's done to actually destroying the creativity and the productivity that's really on tap and infinite for us. So thank you so much. Yeah.
Such a joy. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing your story.
Thank you for having me.
If you would love to know more about the 4 modes of relating, or you would love to understand your own blueprint and realize the fullness of your true nature, visit mavericksmaker.com, where you'll find info on my Thriving Connection immersion. It is here that I enable participants to experience the energetic blueprint that you operate from right now in relationship to yourself, others, and the world at large, yet also give you the first step in creating a new foundation from tapping into your deeper essence and wisdom. To check out Ella's productions and tour dates, visit the link in the show notes where you'll find her contact info. If you loved this episode, please share it and subscribe. By doing so, you help the podcast and our audience to thrive. Thank you so much for listening.